Welcome to Whispers in the Dark. Imagine stepping into a world where reality bends and every step you take leads you deeper into an unimaginable terror. What if the stairs you've always walked by suddenly take you to a place where the rules of time and space no longer apply? Hold tight, because this is only the beginning. You won't want to miss what comes next. Emily Davis sat hunched over her laptop, her fingers dancing across the keys with an urgency she hadn't felt in months. A senior journalism major at Ashland University, she had always been drawn to the strange, the unknown, the stories that lurked in the shadows of the internet, whispered about on obscure forums and in forgotten corners of old blogs. Her dissertation, she hoped, would explore urban legends, their origins, and their ever-growing, ever-evolving place in modern society. Yet, as the days passed and the semester drew closer to its end, she found herself spiraling deeper into an unexpected rabbit hole. One story in particular had caught her attention. Night Stairs. The name alone seemed to drip with a sense of dread, like a forgotten memory half-remembered, clawing its way to the surface. Emily had first encountered the legend during one of her late-night internet binges, buried deep within a forum from the early 2000s. The forum was a relic, one of those places where dark web stories festered in anonymity, and people exchanged chilling tales in the form of cryptic posts. No one knew exactly who started the thread, and for all its obscurity, the story it contained had somehow found its way into the minds of dozens, if not hundreds of people. The night stairs were no ordinary stairs. They weren't something you could find just anywhere or something that existed in plain sight. No, they had to be sought out, a hidden, almost mythical thing appearing only on the darkest nights. To see them, one had to believe in them with a desperate, consuming conviction. But belief alone wasn't enough. One had to search for them, alone in the dead of night in places where no one else dared to tread. Abandoned buildings, decaying mansions, crumbling basements, places left to rot, forgotten by the living. And when the world outside was swallowed by the absence of the moon, the stairs would appear, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to take the first step. The rules, as posted by an anonymous user, were simple, yet terrifying. Find a place where a staircase should be but isn't. That was the key. The stairs didn't just manifest in any old abandoned house. They had to be in a place where the structure was broken, where the stairs would be out of place. It could be a burned-down farmhouse, a derelict construction site, or even a forgotten space within an old hospital building. But it was imperative that the place was abandoned, left untouched by human hands for years. Once the site was chosen, the clock began ticking. The player was instructed to go there alone during a time of absolute darkness. No streetlights, no glowing windows, just the thick, oppressive night. And before stepping onto the stairs, the player had to do something strange. Taste a bit of grass, gravel, or some other object from the area. Why? No one really knew. It was a peculiar requirement, one that many dismissed as mere superstition. But the poster's warning was clear. Without it, the ritual would not work. It was the only way to ensure the player could return to where they started. Emily, captivated by the strangeness of it all, read on, almost mesmerized. The rules, though simple, held an air of finality. Step onto the stairs blindfolded and do not open your eyes until you return. It was a terrifying proposition. The stairs would lead you down or perhaps up, but they would never go as expected. The world you stepped into would not adhere to the laws of physics, of logic, or even of time. It would twist and shift like a maze of endless possibilities, a labyrinth of the unknown. And once you entered, you could not look back, not even once. What awaited the person who dared open their eyes too soon? The warning was chilling. If you open your eyes, you will never return. You will be trapped in a world you do not understand, a world from which you cannot escape. Emily shuddered as she read the post again, the weight of the warning heavy on her chest. But as unsettling as the rules were, they were not what gripped her the most. No, what haunted her mind were the stories, the accounts from those who had dared venture onto the night stairs. The first few replies under the original post were from those who had tried and failed. One user, known only as Creeped-Out01, spoke of a friend who had vanished after attempting the stairs. We went looking for him in an abandoned factory just outside of town. He was gone, no trace. The only thing we found was his blindfold on the floor, and it was torn to pieces, like something had ripped it off of him. Creeped-Out01 went on to recount strange occurrences that followed. Eerie sounds in the factory, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and whispers that seemed to echo from nowhere. Another user, the Watcher, recounted a terrifying experience with the night stairs that bordered on madness. They claimed to have entered an old house where the stairs led down into an impossibly deep darkness, a place where time seemed to stretch and bend in unnatural ways. I counted the steps, 150, 200, 300, but no matter how many I counted, the stairs never ended. I thought I was going crazy. I swear I could hear something breathing behind me, but I couldn't turn around. I didn't dare open my eyes, but the feeling that something was watching me, something far worse than I could imagine, made my skin crawl. And then there was the story of Lost in the Dark, a user who claimed to have found the stairs but had never returned to the forum. The last post they made was a cryptic message. I don't know if I'm still me. The world I've entered isn't like the one I left. There's something here, something that feeds on fear. It has eyes everywhere. I can feel them on me always. The post ended abruptly, as though the user had been interrupted mid-thought. These stories were enough to shake Emily to her core. What was the night stairs? Was it some elaborate urban legend, or was there something truly sinister behind it? Her curiosity burned, and she found herself unable to resist the pull of the mystery. She had to know more. She had to see for herself. The decision was made. Emily would investigate the night stairs. She had come across mentions of them before, passing rumors and obscure references in old horror novels. But this was different. It was a tangible legend, one that had affected real people, people who had shared their stories in online forums and blogs. It was too bizarre to ignore. Emily felt a sense of responsibility, a journalistic obligation to uncover the truth. But deep down in the pit of her stomach, a voice whispered warnings she couldn't ignore. The stories spoke of things that shouldn't be. They spoke of dangers lurking just beyond the edge of reality, waiting for someone to make the mistake of stepping into their world. Still, her ambition and curiosity drowned out the voice of caution. She would need a subject for her thesis, and the night stairs could provide it. As the days wore on, Emily's obsession with the night stairs grew. She dug deeper into the mystery, trying to uncover the origins of the game. She traced the threads back to the early 90s, when the first mention of the stairs appeared on obscure internet forums. She even reached out to old users who had posted about their encounters, hoping to glean some insight. But the deeper she went, the more unsettling the stories became. People had tried to warn her, but she pushed forward. The truth was out there, she was sure of it. What would Emily find when she ventured into the darkness of the night stairs? Would she uncover the truth, or would she become another cautionary tale? She didn't know yet, but one thing was certain. Her investigation into the night stairs was only just beginning. And something in the shadows, something very old and very hungry, was already waiting for her. The decision to investigate the night stairs had consumed Emily's thoughts for days. What began as a passing curiosity had now spiraled into an obsession. The online stories, the mysterious posts, the unsettling warnings, they all felt like a puzzle she could not leave unsolved. It was no longer just about uncovering the truth for her dissertation. It was something deeper, something that gnawed at her with every passing hour. There was a darkness that stirred beneath the surface of the night stairs, something ancient and primal, and she needed to understand it, even if that meant stepping into its depths. The idea of stepping into the unknown, of following the footsteps of those who had vanished into thin air, thrilled her as much as it terrified her. The fear was intoxicating, a sharp, biting thrill that left her heart pounding at the thought of what awaited her. Emily had always been drawn to the edge of the unknown, the fringes of what most people called reality. This was the ultimate test. She had to see it for herself. She had to know if the stories were real. She had spent the past few days preparing, scouring the internet for every scrap of information she could find about the night stairs. Some details she couldn't verify, and others made her skin crawl. Each post, each account painted a picture of something terrifying, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. But it wasn't enough. She needed to experience it for herself. She had already chosen the location, an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of Ashland. It was remote, desolate, perfect for what she had planned. That night, Emily gathered her supplies. She felt like she was preparing for a ritual, each item a small part of a larger equation. A black cloth to cover her eyes, something to taste, the scent of the earth and the crumbled leaves beneath her feet. She was meticulous in her preparation. She knew she had to follow the instructions precisely if she was to succeed in this twisted game. There was no room for error, not when the stakes were so high. The drive to the farmhouse was long and lonely, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears, thick and suffocating. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the night felt thicker than it should have. A cold, unyielding wind stirred the trees as she parked her car far enough away so that it wouldn't be visible from the road. The farmhouse loomed in front of her, its skeletal structure a jagged silhouette against the dark sky. The windows were boarded up and the walls were covered in moss and ivy, the remnants of a time long forgotten. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as she approached the front door. She had read that the stairs could appear anywhere, but she had also learned that certain conditions had to be met for them to manifest. This farmhouse, she was sure, had all the right elements. It had been abandoned for years, the very air of the place thick with decay and silence. The temperature dropped as she stepped closer, her breath forming in wisps in the cold night air. There was something unsettling about it, something that didn't quite feel right, but she pushed the feeling aside. She stood at the threshold for a moment, hesitating. The weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her chest, but curiosity outweighed fear. She stepped inside. The house was filled with the scent of mildew and dust. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight, and the silence seemed to swallow every sound. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming sense that she was not alone. The hairs on her neck prickled. It was as if the house itself was watching her. She could feel the walls closing in, the air growing heavier, more oppressive with each passing second. She found the stairs easily enough. They were located in the back of the house, near what had once been the kitchen. The stairwell was narrow, and the steps were chipped and broken, barely clinging to the decaying wood. Emily stood at the foot of the stairs and took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The instructions were clear. She had to believe in the stairs, truly believe, or they would not appear. She shut her eyes as the story had told her to do and stepped forward. The moment her foot landed on the first step, something shifted in the air. The temperature dropped even further and the silence grew thick, unnaturally thick, like it was suffocating her. The world around her seemed to close in, the darkness pressing against her like a weight. She took another step. The floor beneath her felt solid, more solid than it should have been. Her eyes were still closed, but she could feel it. The staircase was real. The taste of the earth, the gravel, and the moss she had sampled earlier began to linger on her tongue. It was a strange, bitter taste, but it grounded her. She was still on the right path. Emily hesitated, then took another step and another, until she found herself descending into the darkness. The stairs twisted, and her mind screamed that it couldn't be real, but she ignored it. There was no turning back now. The stories had said that the stairs would lead to something otherworldly, something that could not be explained, and now Emily could feel it. A strange sensation, as though the air itself was alive, swirling around her, pressing in from all sides. As she continued, a low hum began to fill the air. It was faint at first, a soft, unsettling sound that seemed to be coming from all directions. It grew louder, more insistent, until it was impossible to ignore. Emily's heart raced as she listened, straining to hear through the darkness. It was a sound unlike any she had ever heard, a strange, echoing hum that seemed to vibrate in her bones. Then came the footsteps. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but as the sound grew louder, she realized it was not. Something was following her down the stairs. She froze, her body tense with fear. She couldn't open her eyes. The rules were clear, she couldn't open her eyes. But she felt the presence, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. And then the laughter. It was soft at first, like the distant giggle of a child, but it quickly grew into something more sinister. The laughter was sharp, mocking, as if someone or something was enjoying her fear. Emily's pulse quickened, and her breath came in ragged gasps. She stumbled, nearly losing her footing on the stairs. The taste of dirt and moss in her mouth became overwhelming, the sensation of it almost suffocating. She continued down the stairs, though every instinct in her screamed to turn back. The laughter grew louder, and with it came the unmistakable sound of something moving through the darkness, circling her. She could feel its presence, the cold, malevolent energy that surrounded her. Her legs felt weak, and the darkness seemed to stretch on forever, deeper and deeper into an abyss that she could not see but could feel consuming her. The moment she thought she might lose her grip on sanity, she reached the bottom of the stairs. But it wasn't the bottom she had expected. Instead of solid ground, there was a soft, spongy feeling beneath her feet, like the earth itself was alive, pulsing with a dark energy. She could feel the floor shifting as though it were breathing, and she knew, deep in her gut, that she had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. Suddenly, there was a sharp tug on her arm. She gasped, spinning around in the dark, but there was nothing there. The pull was strong, unyielding. It felt like something was trying to drag her further into the dark, into the depths of the unknown. Emily's heart pounded as she fought to maintain control. She had to get out. She had to leave. But she couldn't. There was no way back. The rules were clear. She had to find her way back to the stairs without opening her eyes. The footsteps, the laughter, the pull on her arm, it all became too much. The darkness closed in around her, thick and suffocating, and she realized in that moment that the night stairs were not a game. They were something far worse. They were a gateway to something beyond understanding, beyond imagination. And Emily had just stepped through. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, trying to make sense of the madness unfolding around her. But there was no sense to be made. There was only the darkness, and whatever lurked within it, waiting for her to make one fatal mistake. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stepped deeper into the dark void of the night stairs. Each step she took sent ripples through her consciousness, shaking the very foundation of what she thought she knew about reality. The darkness enveloped her completely, its weight pressing down on her chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to think. The only thing that mattered now was the path ahead, the path that twisted and turned in ways she couldn't predict. There were no sounds except the thudding of her heart in her ears and the faint, eerie hum that seemed to rise from the very depths of the stairwell. Her eyes were still shut tightly beneath the cloth, the only thing separating her from the unknown. The instructions had been clear. No peeking, no matter what. She could feel the chill of the air growing colder with each step, the temperature dropping in ways that didn't make sense. She had expected a chill. After all, it was a ghost story, a legend, but this was something else. It was as though the very air around her had become a part of the staircase itself, like it was alive, breathing with her as she descended. The stairs beneath her feet felt different from what she expected. At first, the sensation was subtle, a mere suggestion of something off, but then it became undeniable. The first few steps were solid wood, old and creaking with age, just as she had imagined. But then, as she continued down, the texture changed. The wood became colder, more brittle, and then suddenly smooth like stone, but slick and unnatural, as though it had been polished by something far darker than time. The next step felt rough, jagged, like the sharp edges of broken glass. She winced, but there was no turning back now. Her feet carried her forward, each step more uncertain than the last. As she took another step, the ground beneath her shifted again. This time it was soft, like mud or thick earth that sank beneath her weight. The sensation was jarring, unnatural. It felt wrong. She stumbled slightly, catching herself with one hand against the wall, but there was no wall. Not really. Just the feeling of something cold, slick, like wet stone beneath her fingertips. But when she moved her hand away, there was nothing there. She pulled her hand back quickly, her heart racing in her chest. The air grew thicker now, almost suffocating. Her lungs burned with each breath as though she were trying to inhale water instead of air. And then the sounds began. At first it was just a whisper, so faint that Emily thought it was her imagination. But as she descended further, the sound grew louder, more distinct. The laughter. It was a soft, eerie chuckle, high-pitched and childlike, sounding as though it was coming from far above her. She froze, her heart pounding in her ears. She thought it was another person, someone who had followed her down the stairs. But no. The laughter continued, reverberating around her, growing in intensity. She wanted to scream, to shout, but her throat felt tight, constricted by fear. Her hands were shaking, her fingers numb as they brushed against the rough, unseen walls. She took another step, her foot falling on a stair that felt like it was made of stone, cold, smooth, and unyielding beneath her. She couldn't help but feel as though she were moving through something alive, a labyrinth of darkness that was aware of her every move, every breath. The laughter echoed again, closer now, almost as though it was coming from inside her mind. Then there were the footsteps, the rhythmic sound of someone or something moving just behind her. It was faint, a mere shuffle at first, but it grew louder, closer. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, but there was nothing. Just the thick, suffocating darkness, the air that pressed against her like a heavy blanket. The steps continued, and the sound of them, slow and deliberate, stayed with her, even as she moved forward. Her body stiffened, but she forced herself to keep going. She couldn't stop now. Emily felt as though she were being pulled, dragged down into the dark, deeper and deeper into a place that should not exist. The steps beneath her feet were changing, shifting with every step she took. At one moment they were solid, firm beneath her, and the next they seemed to give way as though the very ground was dissolving into the void. She stumbled again, but this time there was no wall to catch her fall. She pressed on, driven by something she couldn't explain. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something darker, something that was pulling at her, urging her to keep going. The air felt wrong. It had a taste to it, thick and heavy like the scent of wet earth after a storm. But there was more to it, something else. She could taste the fear, the faintest taste of metal on her tongue, as though the air itself was laced with blood. It filled her mouth, making her gag, but she pressed on. The stairs continued to change beneath her, morphing into textures she couldn't understand. One moment they were rough and jagged, like shards of glass. The next they were soft, like rotting wood. Her mind began to play tricks on her. The sounds grew louder, closer. Those footsteps, those whispers of laughter, and now a new sound. A low, guttural growl, something animalistic, as though something was hunting her in the dark. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs felt heavy, unresponsive, as though the darkness was weighing her down. And then the light. It appeared suddenly, flickering at the edge of her vision, a weak, trembling glow that illuminated the stairs for just a moment. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had read about this. The light was a sign, something that shouldn't be there. The stories spoke of it, strange, flickering lights that guided people deeper into the labyrinth of the night stairs, leading them toward the heart of the darkness. She turned her head, her eyes straining to see in the pitch-black darkness. But there was no source for the light, no explanation for where it came from. It seemed to hover in the air itself, a faint, ghostly glow that cast long, twisted shadows across the stairs. The further she moved, the brighter it became, just enough to make out the dark shapes moving in the corners of her vision. She could see them now, figures, dark and shadowed, standing just out of reach of the light. She couldn't look away. The figures stood still, unmoving, their forms shifting and changing like they were made of smoke and shadow. Their eyes, if they even had eyes, seemed to follow her every movement, their gaze cold and unfeeling. Emily couldn't breathe. She wanted to run, to escape, but her feet were frozen in place. She could feel them, those things watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. She stepped forward, her heart hammering in her chest, and that's when it happened. The stairs beneath her feet shifted again. This time they didn't feel like stairs at all. They felt like something else, something softer, something that pulsed with each step she took. She reached out instinctively, touching the surface beneath her hands. It was wet, slick, like flesh, cold, unyielding flesh. Her stomach twisted in horror, but it was too late. She had stepped into something much darker than she had ever imagined. And then she heard the voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a laugh. It was a deep, guttural voice, like the growl of something long dead but still alive. It came from the shadows, from the figures she had seen standing in the dark. She couldn't make out the words at first, but then, in a voice that seemed to come from all directions, she heard it. Welcome. Her blood ran cold. The voice was warm, inviting, like a lover's whisper in the dark, but it was filled with something much more sinister. It was calling her. No, it wasn't just calling, it was claiming her, pulling her deeper into the void. The laughter returned, this time louder, sharper, echoing through the labyrinth. Emily's breath came in gasps as she realized with dawning horror that the stairs had no end. They were never meant to be climbed. They were never meant to be escaped. She was trapped. Trapped in the darkness, in the labyrinth, and whatever was waiting for her on the other side, whatever had been calling her, was coming closer. The further Emily descended into the labyrinthine depths of the night stairs, the more the darkness seemed to envelop her. It was as though each step carried her farther away from the world she knew, deeper into a place where logic and reason held no sway. The air grew thick, oppressive. Each breath felt heavier, laden with a strange and unnatural weight. It wasn't just the air that was wrong. Everything about the place seemed to distort reality itself. The very fabric of the world around her twisted and warped with every step, making her doubt the solidity of the ground beneath her feet. And then the sounds started. At first they were faint, like whispers in the distance, drifting on the edge of her awareness. But as she continued down, the sounds grew louder, more distinct, each one more disturbing than the last. The first was a laugh, a high-pitched, maniacal cackle that echoed off the walls of the stairwell. It was not a laugh of joy, but of something darker, something predatory, and it sent a chill down Emily's spine. The laugh was followed by another, then another, each one different, each one more unsettling than the last. The sound seemed to come from all directions, reverberating through the very walls of the staircase, echoing in a way that no normal sound should. There was no source for the laughter, no visible figure that could explain the noise. It was as if the laughter was a part of the stairs themselves, an inherent feature of the cursed place she had willingly entered. And then came the footsteps, slow and deliberate, like something, or someone, was moving just behind her. The footsteps echoed in the stillness, each step amplified by the narrow confines of the stairwell. Emily's breath caught in her throat, and she quickened her pace, desperate to escape the oppressive feeling that something was drawing nearer, something she could not see but could feel in every fiber of her being. She tried to turn around to catch a glimpse of what might be following her, but the rules of the game were clear. Her eyes must remain closed. The blindfold, tight and suffocating, prevented her from seeing, and the darkness she had entered was absolute, inescapable. The absence of sight only intensified her fear, leaving her to rely solely on her hearing and her instinct, both of which were screaming at her to turn back. But she couldn't. Every step felt like it was taking her deeper into the unknown, into a place where the boundaries between the real world and whatever lay beyond had become dangerously thin. The laughter continued to echo, a sharp, mocking sound that seemed to taunt her with every step she took. The footsteps were getting closer, their rhythm unchanging, their sound unnervingly deliberate. She could hear them, feel them pressing in from all sides, like a presence that was closing in on her, circling her. And then in the distance, she heard something new, something that made her blood run cold. The faint sound of a bell, its tinkling chime cutting through the silence like a soft, sinister melody. The sound seemed to dance in the air, moving around her, growing louder with each passing second. It was not the sound of a bell she knew. No, this was different. This bell had a quality to it that felt wrong, like it was out of place, like it didn't belong in this space. And yet it persisted, its eerie ring echoing in the darkness. The sound of the bell was followed by something else, a low, guttural growl, so deep and resonant that it seemed to vibrate in the very core of her being. It was not an animal's growl, not the growl of something earthly. No, this sound was otherworldly, alien, as though it came from the very bowels of the night stairs themselves. Emily's heart raced in her chest, and she felt a surge of panic rise within her. She could no longer tell where the sounds were coming from, no longer tell whether they were real or a figment of her own mind. The bell's chime grew louder, more frantic, as though it were calling to something, summoning it toward her. It was then that she stumbled into something, a wide, open space. She had been so caught up in the sounds, in the overwhelming sensation of being watched, that she hadn't noticed the change in the stairs beneath her. The narrow, confined stairwell had given way to an expansive, cavernous room, its dimensions beyond anything Emily could comprehend. The ceiling seemed to stretch out infinitely, far beyond her reach, and the walls, if they could even be called wall, seemed to shift and pulse with a life of their own. There was a strange, unnatural glow in the air, a faint, flickering light that cast long shadows across the floor. It was not a light she could see clearly, but one that seemed to hover just at the edge of her perception, like a distant star whose radiance reached her only in glimpses. And then the music began. The sound of a saxophone, mournful and slow, filled the space, its melancholy notes reverberating through the room. Emily froze, her pulse quickening as the music wrapped around her like a suffocating shroud. The notes were familiar, but not in the way she expected. It was the kind of music that could pierce the soul, stirring a deep, primal ache in the chest. It wasn't just the sound of the saxophone that disturbed her. It was the way it seemed to echo through the room, filling every corner, every crevice. It felt as though the music was alive, as though it was calling to her, guiding her deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. But even as the music played, something else lingered in the air, something more sinister. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted, moving in ways that should not have been possible. Figures, dark and shapeless, emerged from the periphery of her vision, their outlines barely discernible, as though they were made of smoke and darkness. Emily could feel them watching her, their presence heavy and oppressive. She could not see them, but she knew they were there. She could sense their hunger, their need to draw closer, to surround her. The music played on, the saxophone's mournful wail growing louder and louder. Emily took a step forward, compelled by something she couldn't understand. Her feet moved of their own accord, her body responding to the music, to the pull of the darkness. The room seemed to stretch on forever, its dimensions shifting and changing with every passing moment. There was no sense of up or down, no sense of direction. All that mattered was the sound of the music, the hum in the air, and the growing sense of danger that seemed to close in around her. And then she saw them. The figures emerged from the shadows, their forms no longer fleeting, no longer mere silhouettes. They were real now, solid and terrifying in their grotesque clarity. They were tall, unnaturally so, their bodies twisted and elongated, their limbs too long, too thin. Their faces were obscured by shadows, but she could feel their eyes on her, cold, empty eyes that pierced into her very soul. They moved toward her slowly, their steps deliberate, their presence suffocating. The music seemed to stop as they advanced, the silence between each note growing unbearable. And with each step they took, Emily felt herself drawn further into the room, into the darkness. A single thought raced through her mind. I have to get out of here. But no matter how hard she tried, her legs wouldn't move. It was as though the air itself had wrapped around her, holding her in place. The figures closed in on her, their movements unnatural, jerky, as though they were not entirely human, not entirely of this world. She could feel their breath on her skin, cold and rancid, the air thick with the scent of decay and death. They were so close now, too close, their presence overwhelming. She could feel their hands reaching out toward her, their fingers long and clawed, their touch cold and unfeeling. In that moment, Emily knew that she was no longer in control. She was a puppet in a twisted play, and the figures before her were its puppeteers. There was no escape from the night stares, no way out of this place. She had been drawn into its heart, and now she was nothing more than a piece in its game. The laughter returned. It echoed through the room, louder now, more insistent, filling the space with its mocking tone. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many, dozens, hundreds, all merging into one cacophony of madness. The figures in the shadows began to move faster, their movements a blur as they closed in around her. And then the light, the faint glow that had been flickering in the distance, grew brighter, brighter still, until it enveloped her completely, consuming her in its blinding intensity. And Emily knew with a sinking feeling in her chest that it was too late to turn back. The shadows closed in around Emily as she stood there, trapped in the swirling, oppressive darkness of the night stairs. Every step she had taken, every breath she had drawn, seemed to pull her deeper into a place where the rules of time and space no longer applied. The air was thick, suffocating as though it were alive, and with each passing moment the sense of being watched grew more intense. It was no longer just the footsteps behind her or the distant laughter. There was something else, something she couldn't explain, pressing on her from all sides. It was then that she heard it, the faintest whisper, soft like the rustle of a breeze, but filled with a sorrow so deep that it felt like it was coming from the very heart of the labyrinth. At first, Emily thought it was just another trick of the mind, a sound designed to unnerve her further. But the whisper came again, clearer this time, and it spoke a name, Maria. She froze. The whisper was followed by a low moan, a drawn-out sound of pain and longing, as if the very air itself was mourning the loss of something important, something irreplaceable. Emily's heart began to race. She wasn't alone anymore. The presence, which she had been so keenly aware of throughout her descent, had taken shape. It wasn't just the shadows, the strange music, or the creeping footsteps. This was something else, something that was not of this world, yet desperate enough to make itself known. And then she saw her. Emerging from the darkness ahead of her, a figure slowly materialized. A woman, thin and translucent, her body flickering like a candle flame caught in the wind. She was dressed in an old-fashioned gown, one that seemed to shimmer and distort in the half-light. Her face was pale, almost deathly so, with hollow eyes that reflected nothing but endless emptiness. Her lips moved, but no sound came forth at first. Emily could only hear the echo of the woman's presence vibrating in her chest, a pull so magnetic that it nearly knocked her off balance. "Help me," the woman finally spoke, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves, brittle and fragile. "I am trapped here. For eternity. I was lost, and now I cannot return." Emily took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the wall behind her. She had read about ghosts, spirits, the restless souls that wandered the earth, but this was something different. This was not just a spirit seeking peace. This was something far more sinister, something that had been twisted by the very darkness of the night stairs. Her mind raced, her instincts screamed at her to run, but her body remained rooted to the spot as if compelled to listen. "What do you want from me?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. The woman's eyes locked with Emily's, and a cold shiver ran through her spine. She could feel the weight of the woman's gaze like icy fingers on her skin, chilling her to the core. The spirit reached out, her hand trembling as it stretched toward Emily, its movement slow but inexorable like the pull of an invisible tide. "Help me find my way back," the woman said again, her voice breaking with despair. "I cannot go alone. You must guide me through the darkness, through the stairs." The woman's words were like poison in Emily's ears. Something in her wanted to reach out, to offer help, to guide the lost spirit back to wherever it belonged. But deep down, a voice, small but insistent, warned her against it. There was something off about the woman's plea, something that didn't quite sit right. The very way the spirit moved, the desperation in her tone, spoke of a darkness far deeper than Emily had ever anticipated. "I can't," Emily said, stepping back again, her breath catching in her throat. "I don't know how. I'm lost here too." The woman's face contorted, her features twisting in agony, as if her soul were being torn apart by Emily's refusal. For a moment, Emily felt the pull of the woman's grief, the weight of her suffering. The spirit began to wail, a shrill, high-pitched sound that filled the air and seemed to reverberate through Emily's very bones. "You must help me," the spirit cried out, her voice rising in pitch, becoming more frantic. "If you don't help me, you'll never leave. You'll be trapped like me, trapped here forever." Emily staggered back, her heart racing in her chest. She had felt fear before, but never like this. The atmosphere around her grew denser, heavier, as though the very air had thickened with the weight of the woman's words. Emily's head spun, and the darkness seemed to close in on her, swallowing her whole. She felt the floor beneath her feet begin to shift, the walls pulsating, the ground vibrating like it was alive. The entire staircase was shifting, the space warping around her. She turned away, desperate to escape the spirit's gaze, to escape the oppressive feeling that had taken over her mind. But as she turned, she stumbled, her foot catching on something solid. She looked down to see what it was. A long, gnarled root protruding from the floor, its twisted shape creeping up the stairs. It was as though the very ground beneath her had begun to writhe and move, the roots of some ancient, malevolent force crawling up from below. But there was no time to contemplate it. The wailing of the spirit continued, louder now, echoing all around her. She could hear the sound of footsteps again, slow, deliberate, as though something or someone was approaching from behind. Her heart beat louder, faster, each thud deafening in her ears. She turned again, fear surging through her body as she saw them, the creatures. They were not human, not entirely. The creatures that emerged from the shadows were tall, their limbs too long, too thin, like elongated limbs stretching into the darkness. Their skin was stretched taut over their bones, and their eyes, if they had eyes, were black voids that seemed to suck in the light, swallowing it whole. They moved with an unnatural grace, gliding through the air, their mouths gaping open in silent, grotesque hunger. There were more of them now. Dozens, hundreds, perhaps more, creeping from every corner, emerging from the very walls of the night stairs, their movements disjointed, jerky, like marionettes controlled by invisible strings. They began to close in around her, their empty, black eyes fixed on her with an unyielding hunger. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as she took a step back. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to escape, but the stairs continued to stretch out in front of her, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. The creatures were getting closer, their movements growing faster, more frantic. And the spirit, her face contorted in anguish, seemed to merge with the creatures, her form fading into the darkness as though she were becoming one with them. Emily turned, her feet moving instinctively, her body moving faster than her mind could process. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to escape, had to get away from the creatures that surrounded her. But with each step, the stairs seemed to stretch further into the abyss, the darkness consuming everything in its path. And then she felt it cold fingers, icy and unyielding, wrap around her arm, pulling her back into the shadows. She gasped, struggling to break free, but the grip tightened, pulling her into the dark. She looked up to see the woman, or what had once been the woman, now fully consumed by the darkness, her eyes hollow, empty, filled with the very void she had called forth. "You can never leave," the spirit whispered, her voice no longer pleading but hollow and cruel. "You're just like me now, lost forever." And as Emily was dragged back into the darkness, the creatures closing in around her, she knew that she had made a terrible mistake. There was no escape from the night stairs. There never had been. Emily stood frozen in the darkness, her breath shallow, her heart pounding against her ribs. She could hear the murmurs of the world beyond her sight, the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the shadows, the cold whisper of wind carrying scents that didn't belong to the place she had once known. The night stairs had taken her far from the realm she had known, but it was more than just a physical distance. She had crossed into something else, something deep and ancient, something that stretched beyond the fabric of time and reality. The weight of the moment was suffocating. She felt like a stranger in her own body, her senses overwhelmed by the oppressive darkness that swallowed her whole. The walls around her had become fluid, shifting, pulsating, as though the very architecture of the stairwell was alive, breathing, responding to her presence. And in the midst of the shifting shadows, Emily finally understood. The night stairs were not just a game. They weren't some twisted urban legend designed to scare children. No, they were a gateway, one that connected two worlds, two realities, two realms of existence. And she was trapped between them. It wasn't the first time Emily had heard the rumors, but now they seemed to take shape in her mind, their truth pressing against her like the weight of 1,000 unseen hands. The people who had ventured into the night stairs before her, the ones who had vanished without a trace, those were no mere disappearances. They hadn't just gotten lost. They had become part of this world, transformed into something else, something grotesque. The realization hit her like a wave, cold and relentless. They had become part of the night stairs. It was as if the stairwell, the very structure of this place, absorbed them, body and soul, turning them into twisted, horrific versions of their former selves. Their minds, once filled with hopes and dreams, had been warped by the unrelenting forces that ruled this realm. They were no longer human. They were something else entirely, something that roamed the labyrinth, bound to the stairwell by an insidious curse. Emily's breath hitched. She had heard the whispers of people who had returned, people who had tried to escape but found themselves forever bound to the dark heart of the night stairs. But until now, she hadn't fully understood the gravity of their words. The curse wasn't just about being trapped. It was about becoming a part of the world itself. She had seen it in the faces of the creatures that had surrounded her earlier, the twisted beings who had once been human but were now lost to the darkness. They were the ones who had failed, the ones who had stepped too far into the night, who had crossed the point of no return. But she was not ready to be one of them. Not yet. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling from the weight of her discovery. The air seemed to close in on her, pressing tighter and tighter with each passing second. She had to get out. She had to leave. There had to be a way back to the world she knew, a way to break the cycle before it was too late. And that was when she heard the voice. It was soft, a low, melodic hum that seemed to echo from deep within the stairwell. Emily froze, the hairs on her arms standing on end as the voice seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of the air around her. It was coming from somewhere ahead, somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the shifting corridors of the stairs. "You're here." The voice was soothing, calm, almost inviting, but there was something in it that felt wrong, something in the way it twisted the words, contorting them into something dark, something sinister. Emily's pulse quickened, but she couldn't move. It was as if the voice had taken hold of her, locking her in place, drawing her deeper into the heart of the night stairs. "I've been waiting for you, Emily." Her heart stopped. The voice spoke her name as though it knew her, as though it had been watching her for much longer than she had realized. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Her mind screamed at her to turn around to run, but her feet felt frozen, rooted to the spot by an unseen force. "Come closer, child." The words slithered into her mind, wrapping around her thoughts, twisting them until they were no longer her own. It was the voice of something ancient, something powerful, something that ruled the night stairs with an iron grip. Emily could feel it, the weight of its presence suffocating her, pressing her into submission. It was watching her, waiting for her to come closer, to succumb to its call. With every instinct in her body screaming for her to escape, she could feel her feet moving of their own accord, stepping deeper into the stairwell. The air grew colder with each step, and the walls around her seemed to tighten, squeezing her, closing in like a trap. But she couldn't stop. Her body refused to listen to her, as though it were being controlled by something far beyond her understanding. And then, from the darkness ahead, she saw it. It was a figure, dark and looming, its shape barely discernible against the shadows. The figure seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, its form flickering like a candle caught in a gust of wind. As Emily drew closer, the figure solidified, revealing a tall, gaunt man cloaked in shadow. His face was pale, almost translucent, with eyes that gleamed like shards of black glass. His expression was one of utter emptiness, an unfeeling, hollow stare that seemed to pierce through her very soul. "Welcome, Emily." The man's voice was deep, resonant, and it seemed to echo off the walls, filling every corner of the night stairs. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as she realized what he was. He was the one who controlled this place, the one who had become its master. He was the master of the night stairs. The weight of his gaze was suffocating. It was as though he could see straight into her, pulling apart her thoughts, her fears, her deepest desires. Emily tried to turn away, to run, but the force of his presence was too powerful. She felt rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to breathe. The creature stepped forward, his long, spindly fingers reaching out toward her. "You've come far, Emily, farther than most, but you must understand, there is no way out." His voice was laced with a dark amusement, as if he found her struggle to escape pitifully naive. He tilted his head, studying her with those dark, unblinking eyes, and a cold, knowing smile curled at the edges of his lips. "This is not a game, Emily." His voice was like ice. "The night stairs are a part of me now, and you, my dear, are mine as well." The realization hit her like a thunderclap. She had been drawn in just as the others had been. She had stepped too far into this twisted world, and now she was trapped. There was no way back, no escape from the power that ruled the night stairs. But there was still a flicker of defiance left in her, a small spark of resistance that refused to be extinguished. She clenched her fists, her teeth gritted against the terror that threatened to consume her. She would not give in, not now, not ever. But the master of the night stairs only smiled wider, the shadows around him thickening, darkening. And as the darkness closed in, Emily knew that the true test was just beginning. The real horror of the night stairs had only just revealed itself, and there was no way to stop it now. The dark force, the creature who controlled the night stairs, reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, cold, unyielding. It felt like the touch of death itself. "You are mine now, Emily." And as the world around her dissolved into darkness, she understood there would be no escape. Not from the night stairs, not from the master, not from the curse. Emily's body moved on autopilot, her legs carrying her forward with a desperation that only deepened with every step she took. The walls of the night stairs had begun to twist, shifting like the coils of a serpent, an endless tunnel of dark space that opened into itself. There was no forward, no backward, no up or down. The darkness pressed in from all sides, suffocating her thoughts, warping her senses. Every time she looked ahead, the stairs seemed to stretch infinitely, their texture changing with each moment, stone turning to wood, wood to flesh. The ground beneath her feet shifting from solid to spongy, like the soft, wet ground of a forest floor. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat a drum of fear, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond her reach. She stumbled again, her foot catching on something unseen, and barely caught herself on the edge of a staircase that spiraled upward, only to dissolve into more shadow as if it had never existed in the first place. She had been running for what felt like hours, though the concept of time had long since stopped making sense. The shadows around her whispered, and the air became thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very atmosphere was closing in on her, trapping her. Her breathing was ragged, the air in the night stairs cold and stale, filling her lungs with the scent of something decayed, something ancient. Her eyes were still closed, tightly bound by the blindfold she had wrapped around her head, but the stench, the ever-present, suffocating stench of rot, was enough to make her gag. She had no choice but to keep moving forward, her mind refusing to stop for even a moment. Her fingers brushed against the walls, the surfaces slick with a cold, clammy substance that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The sensation was nauseating. There were voices, too distant whispers, too low to make out, but the words seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the corridors, bouncing off the walls and bouncing back into her mind. They were everywhere, those voices. Her name, her fears, her deepest, most buried thoughts echoing in the dark. She couldn't escape them. They were part of this place now, part of her journey. As she rounded a corner, she saw the first door. It was nothing more than a faint outline in the darkness, the edges blurring as though the door itself was being swallowed by the very shadows. Emily reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold metal handle. She twisted it, and it gave way with a loud creak, the sound sharp against the silence. The room on the other side was empty, but she could feel the presence of something ancient, something that had once been alive, now consumed by time and decay. There was a heavy scent of dust, of forgotten things, and as Emily stepped inside, she felt the floor beneath her give way. The door slammed shut behind her, and she turned in a panic. The air in the room seemed to shift, the walls pulsating, and she realized with growing horror that she was not alone. The room, this empty room, was not as it seemed. It was alive. The walls bent and stretched, the floor tilted, and she staggered forward, reaching for the next door. But when she reached for the handle, it wasn't there anymore. The space around her kept shifting, changing, and no matter how fast she ran, the room kept elongating, stretching into a darkness that seemed to swallow her whole. Emily screamed in frustration. Every door she opened, every path she took led to more confusion, to more twists in the labyrinth. No matter how many times she tried, she couldn't find her way out. The world around her had stopped making sense. It was like walking in circles, trapped in a nightmare that refused to let go. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, playing a cruel game, shifting just when she thought she had found an escape. The more she struggled, the further she drifted from the light. The world was closing in on her, and she was nothing more than a puppet in a twisted play of fate. She couldn't breathe. Her head spun, and she felt herself faltering, the ground beneath her shifting like sand, swallowing her whole. The feeling of being watched, of something unseen waiting just behind her, gnawed at her. She could feel the gaze of something in the darkness, something ancient and hungry. It wasn't just the creatures from before. It was something far worse, something that ruled over the night stairs with an unyielding force. Something that had seen too many souls lost in this labyrinth, too many people taken by the darkness. And then, just as she thought she might collapse from the sheer weight of her fear, she saw it. Another set of stairs, one that seemed to glow faintly in the distance. The steps, though half buried in the dirt, stood resolutely in the darkness as though waiting for her. They called to her, pulling her forward with a promise of escape. Emily knew without a doubt that these stairs were different. They weren't like the others. These were the real stairs, the way out. But as she stepped toward them, the walls around her began to close in. The room began to distort, pulling away from the stairs like a veil being lifted, revealing a terrible truth. She couldn't open her eyes, not yet. She had to stay true to the rules, but the presence, the feeling of something ancient and alive, was growing stronger. The walls had become slick with moisture, and the ground had begun to shift again, crumbling beneath her feet. The darkness was closing in, but the stairs were still there, beckoning her forward. Her mind raced as she realized something terrifying. The only way to escape this nightmare, the only way to break free from the night stairs, was to break the one rule she had adhered to. She had to open her eyes. Emily's pulse raced. Every instinct screamed at her to follow the rules, to keep her eyes shut, to trust the darkness and the journey. But everything she had encountered so far, the shifting rooms, the growing terror, told her that there was no way out unless she did the unthinkable, unless she broke the very thing that had kept her going this far. Her breath caught in her throat as she stood before the stairs, her fingers trembling against the cool, smooth surface of the first step. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to look, to break the blindfold and see what lay before her. But she knew the consequences. She had read the stories. She had heard the warnings. To open her eyes would mean to forfeit her life, to let the darkness take her completely. But there was no choice. She was trapped. With shaking hands, Emily pulled at the blindfold, her heart pounding in her ears as the fabric slipped away from her eyes. The moment the blindfold was gone, everything changed. The world around her snapped into focus, the darkness lifting in an instant. The stairs beneath her feet, the walls of the labyrinth, the shadows that had haunted her, all of it became clear, sharp, and painfully real. But what she saw was not the way she had hoped. The stairs, the doorway, the very room she stood in, all of it was part of something else, something far darker than she had ever imagined. The world around her was not just an empty labyrinth. It was a living, breathing entity, its form shifting in response to her very presence. The walls twisted and writhed like serpents. The floors buckled and heaved as though they were alive. And the creatures, the twisted, malformed things that had once been human, were there, staring at her from the corners of her vision. They were waiting for her. The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. There was no escape. The night stairs had been waiting for her to make this very choice, to open her eyes and seal her fate. And now, as the darkness crept closer, as the air grew heavier with the weight of its curse, Emily knew there was no going back. She had chosen the stairs, and with that choice came the price of her soul. And the thing in the darkness, whatever it was watching. Watching, waiting for her to take the next step into the heart of the night stairs. The escape she had so desperately sought was a lie. There was only more darkness. The night stairs had stretched her beyond the limits of her endurance, but now, as Emily stood facing what could only be described as the very essence of nightmare, she understood. The darkness, the labyrinthine twists of the stairs, the unsettling figures that had been shadows and whispers in her mind, all of it had led her here, to this one final moment. The very place she had fought to escape was now her battleground. She could feel it before she saw it. The air had changed, thickened with something oppressive, as if the darkness itself had coiled tighter around her, preparing to strike. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but there was nowhere to run, no way to hide. Her mind screamed in terror, but her feet remained rooted in place. The floor beneath her seemed to breathe, pulsing with each beat of her heart, reminding her that this world, this twisted, insidious dimension was alive. It was watching. And then, through the abyss, it appeared. It was not one creature, but many. They emerged from the blackness like phantoms, rising from the walls, the stairs, and the very shadows themselves. Each of them was an abomination, a grotesque mockery of what had once been human. Their bodies were twisted, elongated, and distorted. Limbs stretched beyond the bounds of nature, their skin hanging loosely, as if their very form was being unraveled. Their eyes were the worst part, dark, empty voids, their pupils nothing but black holes that sucked the light from the room and twisted everything in their path. They moved with unnerving grace, slithering toward her, their mouths gaping open like wounds, filled with jagged, broken teeth. Their movements were too smooth, too calculated, like creatures who had mastered the art of hunting. They were predators, and Emily was their prey. Her heart thundered in her chest, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. There was no time for thinking, no time for hesitation. Emily's body moved instinctively, her feet carrying her through the ever-shifting maze of the night stairs, as if she could outrun the terror that pursued her. But no matter how fast she ran, the creatures were always there, just behind her, their presence suffocating, their hunger palpable. The sounds of their footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed in the hollow stairwell, each step like a drumbeat that heralded the end. The laughter, the soft, mocking chuckles, were louder now, more insistent. They were closing in. Emily's pulse quickened, her mind racing to find a solution, to understand the madness that surrounded her. She couldn't keep running forever. And then in the heart of the labyrinth, the true terror revealed itself. From the shadows it stepped forward, a figure so large, so grotesque, that it seemed to bend the very fabric of the stairwell. Its form was cloaked in darkness, a mass of shifting tendrils and slithering limbs. It was no longer humanoid, but something far more ancient, more primal. The thing had eyes, hundreds of them, blinking and squirming like maggots on its skin, staring at Emily with an intelligence that was more horrifying than any mindless monster. Its mouth was a gaping, black abyss that seemed to devour the very light around it, its jagged teeth glistening with saliva. The creature looked at her, its gaze piercing into her very soul. She could feel its hunger, its predatory desire, creeping into her bones, into her flesh. It was the source of everything, the master of this twisted domain. And now Emily had to face it. A single thought echoed through her mind: survive. The creature moved toward her, its movements too fast, too sudden. Its limbs stretched out like serpents, its claws reaching for her with an unholy speed. Emily stumbled backward, the air around her thick with the sound of her heart pounding in her chest. She barely had time to react before it was upon her, its jaws snapping, its claws raking at her skin. But then, as if in answer to her desperation, something inside her clicked. Something deep within her primal instincts stirred. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a fighter. In a burst of adrenaline, Emily pushed herself forward, ducking just as the creature's claws slashed through the air where her head had been moments before. She grabbed a jagged piece of stone that had broken off the stairs, her fingers closing around the rough edge. She swung it at the creature with all her strength, the stone meeting its flesh with a sickening crack. The creature howled in pain, but it did not retreat. Instead, it twisted its head toward her, its eyes flashing with an almost maddened fury. It seemed to grow larger, its body swelling and pulsating as if it were feeding on her fear. It opened its mouth wide, revealing rows upon rows of sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light, ready to tear her apart. But Emily didn't flinch. She had no choice now. She was no longer a passive observer in this nightmare. She was part of it, and she would fight to survive. With a scream of defiance, Emily lunged forward again, aiming the stone at the creature's throat. The jagged rock met its skin with a sickening crunch, and for a moment the creature's movements faltered. Its eyes flickered, as if in surprise at her resistance. Emily seized the moment, pulling herself free from the grip of terror that had held her captive for so long. But the battle was far from over. As the creature recoiled, more of the twisted beings emerged from the shadows. Their numbers grew, filling the space around her, their grotesque forms closing in like a storm. Emily's mind raced. She couldn't take them all on at once, not like this. She was outnumbered, outmatched. The terror of being overwhelmed pressed on her, suffocating her every thought. But then, in the chaos of the attack, something else began to shift. Emily realized with a surge of clarity that this was no longer just about fighting for survival. It was about breaking the curse that had bound her to this place. She had been trapped in the night stairs, yes, but there was a way out. She had felt it before, buried deep within her. The answers were within her reach. In the midst of the chaos, Emily remembered the stories, the whispered warnings. She had heard the phrase again and again: "Those who open their eyes will never leave." But she had already broken the rules. She had already crossed that line. The creature before her, the master of this place, was feeding on her fear, on her very essence, but there was more to it than that. She had been drawn into this nightmare, but now she understood that she could choose how it ended. With a steadying breath, Emily closed her eyes, shutting out the maddening sight of the creatures that surrounded her. She wasn't going to give in to the terror. She wasn't going to let them control her. The moment her eyes closed, the world around her seemed to shift. The laughter, the growls, the screams, all of it faded. The creatures halted, their grotesque forms frozen in place. The weight of the darkness that had been suffocating her seemed to dissipate, replaced by something else. A sense of stillness, of control. And in that moment, Emily knew the truth. She had to sacrifice something in order to escape, something vital, something core to her being. Her fear. Her very will to survive. She had to give up her humanity, her connection to the world outside the night stairs, and become something else. Something stronger, something darker. As the creatures shifted around her, their forms writhing in confusion, Emily felt the change happen. It wasn't physical, not entirely, but it was a transformation of the mind. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was controlling it. She had become one with the night stairs. And now, for the first time since she had entered this nightmare, Emily was in control. But there was a price. She had given up her humanity and with it her connection to everything she had known. She had entered the heart of the night stairs and she had embraced it with all its darkness and terror. She would never be the same, but she was free. She had won. Emily stood at the threshold, the darkness surrounding her like a living thing, pulsating with a rhythm that matched the thundering of her heart. The labyrinthine stairwell had consumed everything she was, every ounce of her strength and every shred of her sanity. She had fought, bled, and stumbled through this twisted realm, and now, with the night stairs stretched out before her once more, she felt something unfamiliar stirring within her, an almost magnetic pull. But it was different this time. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't even human, at least, not the way she had been when she first entered this place. The air around her felt alive, buzzing with an energy that she couldn't comprehend. It wasn't like the still, suffocating silence that had previously haunted the labyrinth, nor the oppressive weight that had followed her every step. This was something else. It was an unsettling calmness, one that resonated in the very marrow of her bones. It was as though she had become part of the night stairs, as though the stairs themselves were part of her now. The realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. She couldn't go back. There was no going back to the life she had left behind. The life she had known was gone. The Emily that had first entered the night stairs, terrified and uncertain, was no more. In her place was something darker, something forged in the depths of this place, a version of herself that had been reshaped by fear, by terror, and by the unrelenting power of the night stairs. But there was no time to dwell on that. There was only the need to leave. There was only the desire to escape, to break free from the nightmare that had consumed her. For the first time since she had set foot on the stairs, Emily was not running from something. She was running toward something. Freedom. Or at least that was what she told herself. She had learned the rules, had faced the horrors of this place head-on. The night stairs were a puzzle, a twisted, malevolent game that had no intention of allowing its players to escape. But Emily had done it. She had fought her way through, had endured every horror and every challenge the stairs had thrown at her. She had stared down the master, faced the creatures that had once terrified her, and now she had come to understand the truth. The night stairs were not just a place. They were a test, a trial that forced her to shed her humanity, to lose herself in the darkness and find something far more dangerous, far more powerful in its place. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the blindfold. It had been her protection, her shield, for so long. But now, as the weight of her decision settled on her chest, she knew what she had to do. She had to look, she had to see. To truly leave this place, she would have to break the final rule, the one that had bound her to the night stairs all this time. Emily's eyes flickered open and the world exploded into light. The darkness receded, but it was not the world she had left behind. No. The night stairs had changed her, had taken something from her. As she looked around, her surroundings shifted in ways that defied logic. The walls seemed to bend and warp before her eyes, the floor beneath her feet rippling like water disturbed by an unseen hand. The space around her was unstable, shifting between the worlds she had walked through during her journey. It was as if the boundaries between the realms had become porous, bleeding into one another. She stumbled forward, her vision blurry, her body trembling from the effort of standing upright. The ground felt uneven beneath her, as though it were shifting and moving with a mind of its own. She had felt this before. the sensation of being trapped in a world that wasn't quite real, a place that twisted and reshaped itself according to its own dark will. But this time, she wasn't overwhelmed. This time, she could feel the power she had gained, the strange, unholy strength that pulsed within her. But even as she moved through this shifting space, something else lurked in the corners of her mind. The change in her body was undeniable. Her skin, once soft and smooth, had become rough and scarred, marked by the remnants of her journey. She could feel it, the heaviness in her limbs, the unnatural stillness in her muscles. It was as though the night stairs had taken a part of her, twisted it, and left something else in its place. She wasn't sure what she had become, but she knew it wasn't the woman who had entered this place. The creature that stared back at her from the glass of a shattered mirror was not a reflection she recognized. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, had darkened. Her face was drawn, gaunt, a shadow of the person she had been. The world around her continued to shift and distort. The walls pulsed, breathing in time with her own heartbeat. Her mind was dizzy, overwhelmed by the constant changes, the twisting corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly before her. But there was a way out. She had to find it. She had to leave. Every step she took felt like a struggle, her body fighting her every movement. She was not the same. The night stairs had taken more from her than she could have imagined, had left her broken, disfigured in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. And yet she had made it this far. She had survived, and now she had to finish it. There was no other option. She had no choice but to press on. As she staggered forward, she saw it, the way out. The door, a faint outline in the distance, beckoned to her like a beacon of salvation. She rushed toward it, her breath ragged, her pulse quickening with the anticipation of freedom. The door creaked open before her, the sound deafening in the oppressive silence of the night stairs. Beyond the door she saw the world. It was her world, her reality, but it was different. It felt like a dream, a place where nothing quite fit, where the edges of the world were blurred and uncertain. Emily stepped through the door, the world shifting again, as though the very act of crossing the threshold had caused everything around her to bend and break. But as the door slammed shut behind her, she realized something. She wasn't free. Not truly. The world she had returned to was not the same one she had left behind. The price of her escape had been higher than she could have imagined. The changes in her body, the dark power that had replaced the fear and uncertainty, she could feel it, thrumming just beneath the surface, waiting to break free. And she knew then that the escape she had fought for, the freedom she had longed for, had come at a cost. She was not the same person who had walked into the night stairs. She had lost something vital, something essential. The night stairs had taken it from her, and now she had to live with the consequences. The door slammed shut, and she was left standing in a world that was not quite real. The shadows, the darkness, everything that had once been contained within the labyrinth had followed her, and now she was its prisoner. Forever. The escape was over, and the true cost of it had only just begun. The air felt different when Emily stepped back into the world she had once known. It was the same world, no darker, no more ominous. But to her, it was as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes, revealing a truth she had never imagined possible. The sunlight seemed too bright, the sounds of birds and wind too sharp, as though she had just emerged from a deep, suffocating cavern and into a reality that no longer belonged to her. She had escaped the night stairs, or so she thought. Her hands trembled as they gripped the steering wheel of her car, the engine humming steadily beneath her. The road stretched out in front of her, familiar and unchanging, but nothing felt right. The unease that had started in the labyrinth, in the twisting corridors of the night stairs, had followed her, clinged to her like a second skin. It was there in the way she looked at the world now, as though the edges of everything were softening, dissolving into a haze of uncertainty. It was in the shadows that lingered too long at the periphery of her vision. It was in the whispers that seemed to follow her, no matter how fast she drove, how far she went. Emily glanced in the rearview mirror. Her own reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't the same person who had entered the night stairs. Her face was gaunt, hollow, as though the journey had drained the very life from her. Her eyes, once sharp and filled with curiosity, were now dull, haunted. They held secrets dark and dreadful that no one could see. But Emily felt them, thrumming deep within her chest, pulling her back towards something she didn't want to face. The night stairs had marked her. She couldn't explain how she knew, but Emily knew. The things she had seen, the creatures she had encountered, they had followed her out. They were still there, lurking in the shadows, watching her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. The very air around her felt charged with their presence, their hungry, unblinking eyes fixed on her as if they were just waiting for her to slip, waiting for her to make the mistake of letting down her guard. It wasn't just in the corners of the dark or in the flickering of the street lights. It was everywhere. It was in the crowded coffee shop where she tried to distract herself, the flickering shadow in the corner of her vision that made her skin crawl. It was in the way people around her seemed too still, too quiet, as if they weren't quite real. The night stairs had shown her a new world, one where things were never as they seemed, where the shadows were alive, and the darkness was always just a breath away. Emily had tried to tell herself it was over, that she was free. She had survived the horrors of the night stairs, defeated the creatures, and found her way out. She had opened her eyes, faced the terror, and broken the curse. But the truth was, nothing had really changed. The stairs were still there, still waiting for her, and now she had become part of it. She couldn't escape. There was no escaping the darkness once you had seen it. The world around her felt different. Every room, every street, every person she encountered seemed strange, alien, as though the very fabric of reality had been altered by her journey. Her mind kept drifting back to those final moments in the labyrinth, the endless stairs, the terrible creatures, the oppressive darkness that had threatened to swallow her whole. She had thought escaping would be the end, that she would return to her life as if nothing had happened, but she hadn't understood. The night stairs never let you go. They marked you. They twisted your soul, and once you had stepped into their world, there was no leaving unscathed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out absently, her fingers numb as they swiped across the screen. The notification was from a news app, a headline that caught her eye. Another missing person, mysterious disappearances linked to abandoned locations. Emily's stomach dropped as she read the article. It was like déjà vu. The names of the missing weren't familiar, but the circumstances were the same. People vanishing from abandoned buildings, from places that seemed to hold an unexplainable pull. The police had no leads, no suspects. They were just gone. A shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't the first time she had seen something like this. In fact, it was happening more and more, as if the world were slipping into a state of quiet panic, a creeping realization that something, someone, was taking people, pulling them into the darkness, just as she had been taken. She knew now that the night stairs were not just a game, not just a place. They were a gateway, a rift between worlds, a place where souls were torn from their bodies and forced to live in the shadows forever. And somehow she had become a part of it. Her phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. She opened it with a growing sense of dread. The message was simple. I see you, Emily. Her hands clenched around the phone, her breath catching in her throat. She looked around, her heart pounding, but there was no one. Just the steady hum of the city, the rush of cars on the road, the hum of the streetlights above her. But in the silence she could feel it, the presence watching, waiting. It was the same feeling she had felt when she first stepped into the night stairs, the same sense of being followed, of being stalked by something far older, far darker than she could comprehend. The message didn't stop there. The next one came quickly, almost instantly. You are not free. It was signed simply, The Master. Emily's blood ran cold. She slammed the phone into the passenger seat, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The air around her thickened, pressing in like a vice, and she could feel them closing in on her. The creatures, the shadows, the master himself, they knew she was out. They knew she had escaped, and they were waiting for her to falter, to slip back into their world. She couldn't breathe. She could feel the weight of their presence in the back of her mind, pressing down on her, suffocating her. She had come so close to freedom, and yet it was slipping away. The nightmare had followed her. The curse of the night stairs was not something that could be outrun, not something that could be escaped by mere physical distance. It had burrowed into her soul, into the very fabric of her existence, and it was never going to let her go. A soft thud against the car window broke her out of her reverie. She gasped, turning to see a figure standing outside, shrouded in the darkness, their face obscured by shadows. It was a man, or something resembling one, his figure elongated, twisted in ways that made her stomach churn. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, empty pits of blackness that swallowed everything in their path. He reached out toward her, his hand pressed against the glass, his fingers curling with unnatural grace. The master. She wasn't free. The realization settled over her like a shroud. She had thought that by escaping the night stairs she had won. She had thought that by leaving she had beaten it. But she had only escaped the labyrinth for a moment. The shadows were closing in again. They were always closing in, never far from her, never letting her forget what she had seen, what she had become. The master was here in the real world, and he was calling her back, drawing her into the darkness once more. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was simple, cold, and final. You cannot hide. You will return. The message was not just from the master. It was from the night stairs itself. And as Emily stared out into the night, into the face of the creature standing just outside her window, she understood. The escape was never real. The terror would never end. The night stairs were with her now, and there was no escaping what she had become, a prisoner, bound to a realm that would always hunger for her soul. She had opened her eyes, and now she could never unsee it. The world she had once known was gone, replaced by something darker, something worse. And the worst part, it was just the beginning. The night stairs would come for her again, and next time she wouldn't be able to escape. Not ever again. The story of the night stairs is a chilling descent into the unknown, where Emily's curiosity leads her into a dark, supernatural realm that twists reality and forces her to confront not just physical dangers, but the very core of her being. From the moment Emily stumbles upon the ancient legend of the night stairs, she is drawn into a web of mystery and horror that slowly consumes her, forcing her to face creatures beyond comprehension, unravel the curse that binds them, and ultimately confront the terrifying reality that the line between the living and the dead is not as distinct as she once believed. Emily's journey through the night stairs represents the lengths to which humans will go to uncover the unknown, even at the risk of their own sanity and safety. The story is a stark exploration of the terrifying consequences of curiosity, the human drive to seek answers, and the inevitable toll that such quests for knowledge can exact. Despite her determination, Emily learns that the night stairs are not just a game or a legend, but a powerful force that manipulates those who enter its domain, twisting their fates and leaving them forever marked. Her escape seems almost too easy, yet it is clear that she has not truly escaped. The night stairs have left a permanent mark on her, one that transcends physical reality and follows her into her own world. In the end, Emily's battle with the supernatural forces in the night stairs was not about escaping the darkness, but about understanding the true nature of her existence and the price she would have to pay for stepping into a world that was never meant for her. From Emily's terrifying journey, we can extract an important lesson about the human experience. Curiosity and the search for answers can lead us down paths we may not be ready for, and some truths are better left unknown. Emily's descent into the night stairs was a result of her insatiable curiosity. But it was this very curiosity that led her into the grip of forces beyond her comprehension. It's a reminder that, sometimes, the questions we seek answers to are more dangerous than the ignorance we initially feel. There are times when it's wise to resist the temptation to dig too deep, to walk away from the allure of the unknown, especially when it comes at the cost of our mental or spiritual well-being. Moreover, Emily's story teaches us that the struggle for control is often futile. Despite her efforts to escape, Emily's battle with the night stairs was not only a physical one, but a mental and emotional one as well. She was forced to confront the darkness within herself, her fears, her weaknesses, and the parts of her soul that she may have wished to ignore. In life, we are often faced with moments when we can either succumb to our fears or confront them head-on. The key takeaway is to recognize the importance of balance, acknowledging the darkness but not allowing it to define or consume us. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the story of the night stairs reveals about the human condition? Do you believe that sometimes curiosity can lead to destructive paths? How would you handle such a terrifying and supernatural challenge in your own life? Please share your thoughts and reflections in the comments section below so that we can learn from each other's perspectives. And if you enjoyed this story and the lessons that came with it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates us to continue creating more engaging and thought-provoking content for you. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and we look forward to bringing you more stories that delve into the unknown.